In this video, I show you how to use Street Fighter miniatures to play Street Masters. Before we get into today's video, I want to share the GGGG. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks one of my Patreon supporters to receive the gratitude gift of the month. And for April 2021, the gratitude gift is a $140 level of Street Fighter, the miniatures game. That pledge I have in hand and will be mailing it out to the Patreon supporter who is chosen by Bob. Also for this month, we have a $100 all-in pledge for Talisman Saber's Gloomhaven terrain. If you haven't seen that video, make sure to check it out here. Click on the link below if you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter and getting a chance at being chosen. So a couple of weeks ago, my pledges for Street Fighter miniatures game finally delivered, and since then I have been excitedly making and transforming the game to be able to be played with Street Masters. I have yet to play the actual rule set that comes with Street Fighter, and from some of the reviews that I've seen so far, it does seem like a fun 1v1 game. But most of my games that I play are co-ops, and I do know that there is a co-op version, so I definitely will be checking that out with Street Fighter. But I do know that I really like playing Street Masters. Street Masters is sort of a card-driven game where you're managing your hand and using cards in order to do power and power-ups. And obviously Street Masters takes after classical fighting games like Street Fighter. One of the things that I really like about Street Masters is that you have this build-up of your characters as you're going along, and it feels really satisfying to be able to pull off some awesome combos. And there is some great gameplay mechanics that comes from Street Masters that I really appreciate. You are also rolling dice just like in Street Fighter, so there is an element of luck, but I do like that feature. And this game is actually readily available, about $85 on Amazon. Again, links for everything that I mentioned below in the descriptions, and you can get a hold of this game right now. I did not back the Kickstarter, so I only have the base pledge, but there is plenty of gameplay in the base box that I don't feel like you need to get the expansions. If you like it a lot, then you can pick up the expansions later, because Blacklist Games, who creates the game, tends to have multiple follow-up Kickstarters and opportunities to be able to jump in. But again, I only have the base box and it is plenty of gameplay. So I did paint up all of the miniatures that is in the base box, and they're perfectly fine, and they function actually very well. But in terms of scale, they are relatively small. So look at the difference between this model and the ones from Street Fighter. So just a lot bigger with the Street Fighter miniatures. And one of the things that I was excited about in receiving my Street Fighter pledge was to be able to convert it. So I knew early on, when I first played Street Masters, that I was going to convert the Street Fighter miniatures to be able to play with this game. And it's actually not that difficult, but I'm all about deluxifying games and making them look as awesome as possible. So Street Fighter is perfect to use component-wise for Street Masters. And all of the pieces that you see here are available for free on Thingiverse, all with the exception of these cloning vats. And these were purchased from Dragon's Rest. Again, links in the descriptions below. But everything else is available for free. Street Masters does come with 8 different boards, but they in and of themselves are not hard to recreate. And I only use the same board layout with just changing the different terrain features of it by using these 3D printed tokens. So it's actually not that difficult to recreate most of the boards. And I'll explain later in more detail that some of them I did choose to make these 3D elements like these walls and these cloning vats. But For the most part, the others are just using tokens, and that makes it relatively easy. At the end of the video, I do have a tutorial on how to make and paint everything, so feel free to use the timeline below to skip ahead if you need to see that. The biggest problem in terms of conversion that I needed to figure out was how to signify which one of the miniatures represents the miniatures from Street Masters, because there isn't a one-to-one correlation, although some of the models are pretty clearly based off of the same characters. So the system that I came up with was to use these colorized tokens and able to just set them onto the base of the miniatures, and that's an easy way to know that this model is representing that particular minion. So that has worked out super well for us. And the scale difference is significant just based off of the hexes. So the regular hexes from Street Masters is only 1 inch wide, and to fit these large bases from Street Fighter, I needed to increase the hexes to 2.5 inches. So the scale of Street Fighter is 250% of the scale of Street Masters. So the board is about 27 by 27.5. That's not so huge that you can't get it on your table. So let's go ahead and take a look at the process. So the first issue that I tackled is trying to figure out how to make these boards. Again, needing to increase up to 2.5 inches. The first place I went to was to look for a vinyl mat overlay, and I knew that Table War was selling these and went over to their website to check it out. And I really like how you can just place them on top of any of the mats just to create the grid. But unfortunately, the max size that you could get is 1.5 inch hexes, and I needed 2.5. So I decided to go and make my own and went to Hobby Lobby. And in this section where you can buy vinyl, I purchased this vinyl for only $8 a yard. And 1 yard is plenty. In fact, 27.5 inches is the longest piece that you need. And then I printed out this hex map, and I printed it out using the poster feature where I needed to tape these pieces together. And then after overlaying the vinyl, I figured out how much to cut so that it was overlapping on top of the paper. And after cutting it, I taped the edges down, the corners down, so that it would not move while I was doing the next step. Now I have a Cricut Explore Air 2, which is a cutting machine, but I know that many of you don't have this, so I'm not 100% sure what route you would take. I mean, hand cutting would be a total pain, but this machine allows me to basically cut out all of these hex corners, and I don't quite remember how many you need, but after the machine cuts it out on this vinyl sheeting, I just basically peel it off and stick it on using the hex grid underneath the vinyl as a guide of where to place these stickers. So again, not 100% sure what options you have if you don't have a Cricut machine. It is possible, I think, just to use permanent marker onto the vinyl. That's another option. Or even dots. If you stick just regular sticker dots in each of the corners of the hexes, I think that could function as well, because the hex is pretty apparent once you put those stickers down. So once I'm done with that, I just use a straight edge and a razor and cut all of the edges off, which is relatively easy to do. And this is what it looks like. So you can put the overlay on top of any of your terrain mats that you might have, and I have a bunch from Table War, so I can change up what the scenery looks like underneath by using this overlay, which I think works really well and is super versatile. The one bad thing is that you are dealing with a glossy surface, so that might bug some of you, but it turned out pretty good. But of course, if you want to take it up to 11, you're going to create this 3D board, and it's going to look a lot better. So at first, I went over to Amazon and saw if there were any commercially available hexes at about 2.5. Here it's 3 inches from point to point, but it is pricey because you would need to buy 120 hexes for the full board, and that would mean you would need to buy 5 of these. So that's $50 for that. So I decided to look for printing options, 3D printing options, and found these files that I have used many of his files for Gloomhaven, and I downloaded the single ones and basically grabbed as well these walls from OpenForge and stretched and manipulated them and resized everything so that it would fit the scale. I use Microsoft 3D Builder. Check out my tutorial if you need to learn how to use this super simple program to modify STL files. And so it was relatively easy to be able to resize everything so that it would fit the scale. Again, all of these files are available on Thingiverse, already resized for you. So this is the original file that I printed out, and I just increased everything. And this is about a little over 6 millimeters tall, and I do think that the textures from this one definitely looks better, but I realized that in order to print out enough of these for a whole board, it was going to take a long time, so I did reduce the height of it back down to 3 millimeters tall, and you can tell that the texture here is not as good as here, but I decreased the amount of time that it was going to take to print these out, which is at half the height of these ones here. You can really tell that it's going to be a lot faster to print these, although if I had the time I would go ahead and do these at 6 millimeter height, and you can adjust all the files that I'm providing, but the files I have are all shrunk down to this size. But if you have time, I would go with a bigger size like this, just because you're going to pick up more details, you're going to have more variation like this. Also, I'm in the process of sleeving all of my cards. I made this insert with my laser cutter. It only took me less than half an hour to design and then print and then laser cut this, which is what I love about my laser cutter. It's way faster than my printers over there. And then I picked up these card dividers from Board Game Geek in the file section, links in the descriptions again, and I print them out on cardstock and then I laminate it. I use this corner punch to round out the edges. I only do the top edges like that, and so this is what it looks like. And I'm sleeving with Sleeve Kings. I bought a ton of these with their last Kickstarter. They're the cheapest option that you can get, pretty good. And I'm about halfway through. There are so many freaking cards to sleeve, but I like sleeving them, especially in games where you're shuffling your deck all the time. And then my storage solution for my miniatures is just this case over here. So to create the Minion disc, I am using my Cricut to cut out these 1-inch discs. And this file is linked below, but you don't need to use a Cricut. You can just get this 1-inch diameter hole punch and do it manually like this, and that totally works. So next you need to print out all of your tokens, and let's first focus in on the Minion tokens, these 30 millimeter discs. What you want to do is print out 12 of the red, green, and blue, because these Minions over here, there's only 3 versions of them. There's no yellow or purple. And then you also want to print out only 8 of the yellow and purple. And that'll be enough to cover all of the Minions. And I'll show you how to get these magnets in them, because they stack really nicely with the magnets. That way they hold together when not in use. And then you're going to do these terrain features, these starting markers. You need 4 of these. These Minion spawn points are 4. There's 4 of these. There's 5 of these. There are 10 of these. And then these are the objective markers. And all of these I did 2-stage printing, where in Prusa Slicer you're able to designate a stop point and tell it while it is printing to stop at a certain point, so that you can switch out the spool color and it will print the rest of it that different color. So I don't know if Cura has that ability or if other slicers have that ability, but that's what I used. in the least, you can just print it out one color and paint them if you don't have all of these different colors. I know that's a lot of PLA to buy just to get the specific colors. Instead, you can do what I've done before, which is just print them out in even neutral color or lighter color like white or like this silver, and then just spray paint it whatever color that you need. And that's a more economical way to save money on just buying into all of these different colors. And forgot about this is the boss spawn as well. All of these files are on Thingiverse, so check out the links below. You also want to print out all of the walls. Now, I did goof up, and for some reason I misjudged how far this needs to be. So this is going to be sticking out just, a couple of inches. I'm not going to bother correcting that, but if that bothers you, go ahead and use MS3D Builder just to cut that off. It doesn't bother me too much, but I'm not going to correct that. These are found on Thingiverse, and again, I'll provide a link. And you do need to print these at 150%, so it's just a third bigger to get this size of scale, because these are originally for Gloomhaven. And it's optional. You really only need 5 crates, but just for variety, I did print out some of these barrels too for loot crates. The only ones that are not found on Thingiverse, these are found at the Dragon's Rest website, and you can purchase these. It's part of a sci-fi lab set, and these have LED lights in them that you can put in there. And if you want to check out my video where I show you a painting tutorial, this is actually from my Space Hulk set, go ahead and click here. And you need 5 of these. Otherwise, you can use the token. I did provide STL files for the token if you don't want to purchase these files, and they look like these. Obviously, you can use whatever colors you want. This is the colors that I chose, except for the objectives. They definitely have to be these colors. So if you take a look at this board, it's pretty easy to recreate this, because if you notice, all of these wood slats actually have no terrain effect on the game. So other than sort of these slots where you're putting on crates, these entry points, the starting slots, the place where the enemy boss comes in, as well as these objective markers, that's really it. So here I've recreated this board, and as you can see, it's relatively simple. And because the board size stays the same, you don't have to make a new board for every scenario, but with this board you can recreate all 8 scenarios. And this is what it looks like with the 3D elements. These are cloning chambers. Here's what it looks like with each one of these cloning chambers glowing with the LED lights. They are color changing, which just makes them even that much more awesome. So there you have it. Hopefully this video is helpful for you if you have the idea of converting or even expanding the game playability of your Street Fighter miniatures game. If you did not get in on backing Street Fighter, then I would suggest waiting, because soon I know that Angry Joe is coming out with another Kickstarter, this time for Mortal Kombat, and you'll be able to jump in. I also know that right now they do have some extra copies from the Kickstarter that you can purchase. Again, links in the descriptions below, but it's going to be a lot more expensive than the Kickstarter prices that we were able to purchase at originally. So my encouragement is to wait for the Mortal Kombat. They might hopefully have some Street Fighter available at that Kickstarter as well. So that might be a good way to get in on these awesome miniatures. I did make an unboxing video of these miniatures. If you want to see that, go ahead and click here. The fact that these are pre-painted miniatures, the fact that they are at large scale, just makes it irresistible to convert into playing Street Masters. Make comments below if you do want a gameplay video of using my converted set to play Street Masters. Again, I think there's a lot of other videos out there that explain the rules and how to play. And I do know that Blacklist Games does have an app. I've never played it yet, but has an app of Street Masters. If you want to play that game just to see if you like the rules before going through all the trouble of converting and making all of these pieces. Otherwise, please like and subscribe. Again, check out my Patreon page to get in on the possibility of being chosen to receive the Street Fighter $140 pledge level at the end of April of 2021. Otherwise, happy hobbying, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. So you want to order these 3x3, it's 3mm by 3mm diameter magnets. And what I do is I stick a bigger magnet, or you can put a piece of metal down here on the end just so that you know you can keep track of polarity. And then I grab one of these, and this is a nail set and it's made out of steel. That's really the only important thing about this. These are super cheap. And I just grab one of these like this, and then I take my circle and I push it in there like that. And then sometimes they need a little bit of encouragement, and so you can just take this and then just give it a tap with a hammer, and that'll get it flush all the way. So once you do that, you can just go ahead and peel off one of your stickers for the Minions. Because I created this lip, makes it super easy to know where it goes. And then now these things stick together. So you can stack all of one of the Minions together so that you can keep track of them easily. Of course, you don't have to do this. You don't have to stick the magnet in there, but if you want to take it to 11, that's what you're going to do. If you have the opposite problem where the magnet is too loose and it comes out, then you can just put a little bit of super glue in the hole and then you can stick it in there after that. But printing these out on your 3D printer, you should be able to just push fit these in here relatively easily. So once you print out all of your floor pieces, I'm using this Liquid Nails heavy duty version because it's only $3 for this entire tube. And I'm gluing it onto this pegboard, but you can use hardboard. It's just this was cheap and I think it was 1/4 inch thick. So go ahead and put your glue down and press all of your 3D pieces on top of that. Sorry, I don't have a print list, but just print enough until you have a whole board filled out. Alright, so I'm using Rust-Oleum Ultra Matte Slate. This is a super dark gray and can be found for about $4 at Walmart or at your big box home improvement store. If you don't have this, another option is this Krylon Chalky Finish Anvil Gray, but this is more expensive, more like $6 a can. This is actually a little bit darker, and so I do like this one, but because it's more expensive, my go-to dark gray is this. If you don't have either of these brands, just pick the darkest gray that you can. You can even use black, but I found black to be a little bit too dark, so this is one of my favorite colors. And then here I only have 2 of my walls. The other walls are currently printing on my printer right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just give it an even coat. The floor's pretty easy. I gotta fill in that spot. And all these spots where the glue squeezed through, so for example right there, just the spray paint will cover it up, so I don't think you have to worry about that at all. So go ahead and spray all of it. Okay, I'm gonna go move inside because it's getting warm out here, but just really quickly wanted to show you that I am spot painting with Honey Brown. So all of these spots, just picking at least one random section of each hex and coloring it in, and just using my large sable brush, keeping it watered down so that it gets into the crevices, and just having a random pattern like this. And then once I'm done with this color, I am going to go ahead and go through, do the same with burnt sienna. So you can pick whatever colors that you want, but these are the colors that I'm doing. But I'm going to go ahead and move inside. I'm not going to show that step, but you'll see what it looks like once I do the first set of dry brushing. All right, so this is what the board looks like as well as the walls. And as you can see, I just spot painted. And I know it looks super garish right now, too cartoony, but these next two steps will help pull it all together. So what I did was I grabbed this slate gray and zinc. And these Americana paints, at least here in the United States, you can buy them at Hobby Lobby or at Michael's. And they're usually like $1.25, $1.35 if you get it on sale, less than $1 each. So I use craft paint for all of my terrain, and I'm going to use a big brush. And what I did was I mixed them about half and half to get the medium gray that I wanted. And then I'm just drying off my brush a little bit so that you can see what it's going to look like when I'm trying to tie it all together. So this coat is going to be relatively thick, and I don't know if the lighting here is good for you to be able to see what's going on, but with this I want to go pull the brush all directions. And when you do this, it mutes these spot colors somewhat so that it isn't quite as loud. And it's a little bit harder to control how much paint is on your brush with this bigger brush. So you really want to make sure that you don't get too much paint on here. But this is about the level that you want. And I'll just come back and maybe do some more levels, but this is about what you're looking for. Basically doing the same thing with the walls, putting on this intermediate gray. Okay, so the final coat is super light, and it's just pure slate gray. So I'm not mixing it with anything, and you have to be super careful with this because you do not want any streaking. So this, I don't know if you can see the demarcation, but this side I did do the slate gray highlighting, and this side I have yet to finish. So the difference is subtle, so we're not going for really a lot of paint on there. Just make sure that your brush is super light. Here, let me see if I can do this one-handed. So just grab a little bit of paint, and there's barely any on there. And then you want to just carefully, again, going all directions so that you're not streaking the paint anywhere. And the difference is very subtle. So you do not want, because this almost looks white compared to the dark gray that's on here. So you want to be really careful about how much paint you're putting on. You're putting on very little paint. See the difference there? So this is the part where you have to be the most careful. So, you use a paper towel or a napkin like this to make sure that your brush is dry, because you can always add more, you can't take away. So just take it slowly and just make the effect subtle like this. And then you want to do the same for the walls. And here I'm just pulling down. And I like to have a fade where it's darker towards the bottom, so I don't even do the bottom that much. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully you can see, I know the lighting is really bad, but go ahead and do that to the rest of the board and the walls.